Hello and welcome to another weekly update on my Whateverathon progress. So I've read a few more books this week. First one I finished this week was A Curse of Roses by Pinguicha. It was very handy to have listened to that on Audible because they pronounced the the author's name, which I very much butchered last time I tried to say it. Now, A Curse of Roses is aimed at YA, and I wonder whether that's why I didn't particularly enjoy it. Other than that, I can't think of a reason why I didn't like it. It had so many things that I usually love, such as being a myth or legend retelling. It was reflective on religion and how religious ideals can be imposed, and not just by society, but by ourselves, on ourselves. I'm not a religious person, but I do find the ideas around religion really interesting. And it's also not like it was written poorly. It was actually a very well written book, but for some reason I just didn't click with it. It just wasn't for me. So I gave it a 3.5 star rating because whilst I didn't enjoy it, I could appreciate that it was objectively a very good book. Curse of Roses on my bingo board checked off S's on the cover. I also listened to this during the 48-hour readathon, and then it also checked off again the and of A. And so that leads me into my next book that I finished, which was Swimming Home by Deborah Levy. This was my first letter prompt, so the S in Swimming Home was the last letter of A Curse of Roses. It also checked off less read genre because it falls into sort of pure literary fiction, which is not something I usually pick up. And it also hit the under 300 word prompt as well. I massively misjudged this one. So I thought this was LGBTQ, so that's why I put it onto this TBR, but it wasn't. And I don't even know why I thought it was. Like, the last book of hers that I read was Hot Milk, and that was LGBTQ. But I mean, nothing in the description, nothing online told me that it was LGBTQ, so I don't know why I thought it was, other than just assuming that because one of her previous books was, that this would be. But anyway, Hot Milk, though, I didn't rate very highly because I just didn't quite get on with it, but I could tell from that book that she was an excellent writer. Like, I really loved her writing, so I was really keen to try another one, which is why I have Swimming Home on my list. In fact, it's just here, Swimming Home. I loved this. This is the standout book for me this month so far. This one is the only one this month that I've rated 5 stars so far. Even though it's not a thriller, it read like a thriller, so it had none of the sort of plot or storyline of a thriller. There was no murder, there was no mystery, no crime, but you're going through the book trying to unravel who these characters are, what they mean to each other and what's going on with them, and it was just plotted like a thriller, and it was fantastic. And some of the themes that are woven through it, I mean, this is going on my to study shelf because I want to reread this and I want to pick out some of the themes that were going through it, some of the imagery that was used, because I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And the twist at the end was just not what I was expecting. It was amazing. The third book that I finished was Red Rising. So this was my host favourite read because it was the only one on the host favourite list that I actually own. This is the first book in a series. It's one of the most well-known books, I think, that I'm reading this month, Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So I won't go too much into the plot because I know that most people will already know or will have watched enough people talking about Red Rising to have formed some sort of opinion on whether they want to read it or not. I've also set this against the academia prompt because technically the majority of the book is set in an educational setting. It's not like any educational setting that we've ever seen, but it is still considered almost like a university. I think they call it the Institute in the book. Do they call it the Institute, or am I thinking of something else? But anyway, they go into this setting which is brutal and basically is to teach them about humanity and how humans rise to power, how they keep power. It was a thoroughly fascinating read. It had a lot of the stuff that I love, which is like the political machinations, how power is gained, how it's kept, and then of course there's also the ways in which people cheat the system, and it was a really fascinating read. There was something about it that meant I didn't give it 5 stars. I think, right, this is it makes me feel a little bit embarrassed, but I wanted more from the romances that were in it. So there is a romance plot line that I'm guessing is going to come more in the next books, but it's very much a slow burn, and it didn't give me quite what I wanted from it. I think this would be better if you're really into battle scenes in your books, because I'm not particularly into battle scenes. I love the politics that surround those sorts of scenes. I tend to get a bit bored when I start reading about a fight scene, so that might be where it lost me a bit. But yeah, I gave it 4.5, so I gave it very high rating, and I'm definitely going to be reading the next one because I loved it. In terms of the story, I was quite shocked at how quickly we moved away from Darrow's life. So Darrow is our protagonist. We moved very quickly away from his life in the low red zone, which from the blurb is sort of what you know about him. He's a lower red, and he rises up to sort of infiltrate where the golds are. So we move quite quickly away from being in the red zone, but actually Pierce Brown does a really good job of conveying what the red zone is, how the red zone works, how the people are a community down there. But yeah, we move very quickly away. So most of the book takes place in the gold zone, the Gold Institute. But I loved Darrow's voice as the narrator. The author was excellent at writing in such a way that you don't feel like you're reading about Darrow, you feel like you're reading from Darrow's perspective very much. The moment I really noticed how well this was done was there was a point where Darrow goes into a very depressive mode. It's only sort of a paragraph or two, but he is so completely in that depressive mode. There was no point at which the author tried to go, oh, but I knew that I needed to do X, Y, Z, or, you know, some sort of thing that came in to give Darrow a greater purpose of some sort. There was none of that. It was just, you were so completely in this self-loathing, you know, place with him. And the only reason I really noticed it is because I've been reading a book about studying literature and how narrators use different methods to do different things. So it's only because I've been reading about it that I really noticed this moment, and I was like, wow. It really annoys me when you have a sad scene or a highly emotionally charged scene, and then you hear the author's voice come in instead of the character that you're trying to read from. So that was just a wonderful thing for me, was how well that was done, how truly in Darrow's mind we were. Anyway, yeah, I loved it. Recommended. Alright, the next book that I finished was Tentacle by Rita Indiana. What did I just read? That is one of the most crazy books I think I've ever read in my life. In fact, I think that might be a theme for June for me, for this Whateverathon. Sexing the Cherry and the Tentacle. Just what on earth, like just crazy books. They are the trippiest books I think I've ever read. So this is a relatively short book at 100 and something pages, but it packs an awful lot in, and that can be a bad thing. That can make it very confusing. It can make it very difficult to get into, say, the world building or the storyline if it's trying to pack too much in. But actually the author did an amazing job of tying all the elements together so that by the end you understand why everything has been done the way it is. In my Storygraph review, so I do all my reviews and my stats and things through Storygraph, but in my Storygraph review I basically said, I've never seen the chosen one trope done in this way. I've never seen it end the way this one did. And the other thing I've never seen done this way is the time travel / parallel lives storyline done in quite this way. So I thought that was amazing to have this book that just completely went a different way to anything I've ever seen before. Having said that, this book definitely divides opinions. It is written in a very angry way. So yes, there's violence in it, but other than that, everything that happens, all the interactions, all the conversations that people are having, are very angry. And I think that's quite a clever writing style because of the subject matter. So the subject going on in this, the thing that sort of connects it all, is the destruction of ocean ecosystems, and then of course how they're trying to solve the problem that has been created. So for them, present time is like 2037, but then there are other time periods that are happening simultaneously. So there's one in the 1600s and there's one, I want to say 2011, turn of the 2000s maybe. But yeah, so everything is very angry, but it means that every time there's a really tender moment going on, it's really obvious, it's in your face, this tender moment, and it almost shocks you that there's like, in all of this angry writing, that there's this moment of tenderness, which I thought was quite clever. Because of that, I wouldn't say it was necessarily an enjoyable read. It was definitely an interesting read, and I gave it 4.5 because to be a 5-star, for me, I have to really enjoy my time reading it, whereas for me it was more interesting than enjoyable. Crazy, crazy story. Okay, so the final book that I finished this week was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was my different format book because it is a story written in verse. I gave this book a 3.5 star rating. I struggled to articulate why it was so low for me. So 3.5 still means it was a good book, but essentially I think that it's because it was a YA. I think the young adult writing style doesn't sit so well with me anymore. It's not that I think that all YA books are bad or anything like that. There are definitely still some YA books that are written that I really get on with. But what I would really love to see is Elizabeth Acevedo writing an adult book, so with adult themes, with, aimed in terms of language at a more adult audience. I'd love to see what she does with that. I do want to read The Poet X, which is another one of her famous books, because I really enjoyed the verse way of storytelling. I thought that was brilliant. I loved what she did with it. But there was just something about this story that didn't quite connect with me. I have to say that from the 20% to 50% mark, I was so close to DNFing. I was getting quite bored. It felt very repetitive. I felt like we were just exploring the same sorts of themes over and over again. And then we got to the 50% mark, and then the final half of the book really went by in a flash. Like, it went so quickly for me. But yeah, there was just something missing for me. But I would love to see more work like this. I'd like to see other authors who are writing in verse, and I would like to see other work by Acevedo to see if I like it as much, or better, if I like it anymore. So let's move on to what I'm currently reading. In physical, I am reading Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. I did a poll on the Whateverathon Discord. I asked people whether, for my physical read, I should have Boy Snowbird, The Emperor Waltz, or The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the House. Boy Snowbird came out the clear winner for that, so I'm reading that one. It's also my shiny cover prompt option. I was a little bit sceptical because I've heard that whilst Helen Oyeyemi is a fantastic author, that this is one of the books that people like the least from her collection. So I was a little bit worried that I wasn't going to enjoy it, but I'm about 30% of the way through, and I am loving it. So good. I am so drawn in. Really want to see where this is going. I don't really know what to tell you about it because I haven't quite settled my thoughts yet. On audio, I'm listening to When Women Were Dragons, which is my dragons prompt. That's by Kelly Barnhill. Again, really loving it. I'm not very far through. I haven't had too many opportunities to listen to audiobooks lately, so I think I'm about 10% of the way in, but again, really loving it. I think it's the sort of book that I'm going to say I really want to own in a physical copy. I think it's the sort of book that I'm gonna want to read again and study and look at. The final book that I'm currently reading is my Kindle book, which is This Poison Heart by Kaylin Bayron. And this was the one, I think, of all the books on this list that I was least looking forward to. And the one that I said last week, I'm having to push up my priority list because I didn't think I would read it if I didn't make sure I got to it this month. I am 25% of the way in and absolutely loving it, which is so nice. I hope it continues this way. I was so worried about reading it, but so far, I mean, again, it's a YA, so some of the writing style, some of the turns of phrases being used, I don't like, but the story behind it, I'm enjoying so much that it's not too much of a worry for me that the writing style isn't there. Yeah, at 25% of the way through, because it's YA, they tend to be plotted quite quickly, so the story seems to be moving at a nice pace. We're getting a lot of sort of mysteries that we want to unravel, and then they're bringing in quite a lot of Greek mythology, which I'm enjoying. So yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes and whether by the end of it I'm actually going to want to read the next one in the series or not, but anyway. So what's left on my bingo board? Basically the only one I really need to tick off is the book about books. As I said last week, I Could have The Emperor Waltz, if I've got enough time to read it. I had thought about bringing in 8 Detectives if I didn't have enough time, because that would be a much shorter book. However, since last week, I have remembered that I am halfway through The Book of Dave by Will Self. So the reason I'm halfway through it, this is a tough book to read. It's one of those books that's so clever that I'm struggling to get the best out of it. And sometimes you can see an author is trying to be too clever and it's annoying. In this case, it's not annoying, but it does make it quite a slow reading journey. So I put this down at the halfway point because I just needed something quicker. I was really sort of struggling, but I do want to finish it. I do want to see where it's going. So The Book of Dave is about a London cab driver who is going through a tough time in terms of the custody of his son with his ex-wife, and he writes a book that's basically a load of homophobic garbage, xenophobic, everything rubbish is in this book. But it gets buried, and many years down the line, when water levels have risen and most of the UK is underwater and London is essentially an island, this new society that's formed find the Book of Dave, and it becomes like their Bible, and they live their lives by the Book of Dave. One of the reasons it's quite difficult to read is that there's a whole new dialect created in this future society, and so every time there's a bit that's spoken, you kind of have to translate it. So there's a glossary at the back, but not all the words are included. Some of it is very much just trying to work it out for yourself, so it's a really difficult book to read, and that's why I've only made it halfway. But as I said, I really want to finish it, so this could be an option for my book about books, because there's enough of this book left that I don't feel too guilty about the fact that it's a half-read book. I don't think this month I'll have any more time for any other audiobooks. That's all my physical books. So I want to finish Boy Snowbird, and then it's likely to be The Book of Dave or The Emperor Waltz that I read. And then on my Kindle, if I do have any more time this month, I think it will likely be either Felix Ever After by Case and Callender, or Wonderland by Juno Dawson, which is not one that was originally on my TBR at the beginning of the month. It does fit into our LGBTQ themes. It's also, I know, one of the favourite books or the favourite authors from the Books Nest channel. Even though it's not on that list of host favourites, I do know that she loved it, so I'm potentially going to read that one as well. So there we have it. I'm now not going to do any more updates till I do my end of the month wrap up. We'll see how it goes for the rest of the month. Thanks for watching.